Joining us to discuss this hour, we have national trial attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael, to that regard, you know, this case, the sentencing was delayed because the defendant was requesting this MRI scan because he's claiming as a mitigating factor the CTE. And this is something that we've seen in the headlines before with professional players such as Aaron Hernandez with the New England Patriots, and also Junior Seau with the San Diego Superchargers at the time.
100% agree with you. On the prior block, you said something, and this is exactly what this is turning into. It's going to turn into a litmus test on CTE. You know, so there's a lawyer that works for me. He's a rabid football fan. He loves college and professional sports. He's got 3 sons. Both of them are big, strong kids, and they all love college football. They're locked down every Saturday, Sunday. They watch college football, NFL, and I asked him a couple of weeks ago, hey, why didn't your sons ever play football in high school? He said, well, my wife and I did the research on CTE, and we don't feel safe putting them in there. Believe me, they're very upset because all their friends are playing football, but we wouldn't let them play football. What's my point? 50 years ago, they would have played football. 50 years ago, this defense theory would not be, this sentencing mitigation factor theory would not be presented. We would not know about it. We would just think he's a bad kid. I'm not saying that CTE is why he did this. Perhaps he did, perhaps he didn't. But defense attorneys are always going to try it. In 50 years from now, Matt, there's going to be theories we currently don't know about that would explain some of the behavior in criminals that currently happens as a phenomenon right now. None of us are aware of it. We just so happen to be learning about CTE right now. There is evidence that CTE does affect people's volatility, and maybe that's what happened here. The father is clearly a well-to-do person. He paid these lawyers well. He said, listen, fix my son. I'm broken about this. Find out what happened. This is not the type of person I raised. This is not the type of person that would do something like this. There must be a reason. And they looked at the football. So I think this is a litmus test on CTE. I think this is a very important case that we're watching. I'm very saddened by the fact that this had happened. He came in a good family, and he did this. And what he did was grotesque, atrocious. So I'm really riveted to see what happens here. Whatever the judge does, though, Matt, it is going to be a precedent for future defense attorneys to use this as a theory. We're going to now ask on a checkboard, right, when we have a client who does, we're going to say, hey, did you ever play football before? We would have never asked that 50 years ago.
That was your point.
It's all good analysis, for sure. I mean, I think parents are definitely watching a case like this, but it'll be interesting to see how this judge looks at the evidence and if it's conclusive, because there is a variety of medical evidence about how you can actually tell if someone has CTE who is still alive, who you haven't actually looked at the inside of their brain. Michael, stand by. We do want to take a break, but we're going to get you back in for more testimony in this sentencing hearing for the Spencer Pearson triple stabbing case sentencing that we're watching. Let's bring in national trial attorney Michael Jaafar to see how he feels about what we're hearing about. And Michael, when I was a practicing attorney, I was involved in a lot of traumatic brain injury cases, but those were civil cases where you're convincing a judge or a jury that it's more likely than not that this injury was caused by XYZ. But here it's different because we're talking about someone who's accused of attempted and has pleaded guilty of attempted murder, and we're asking a judge to lessen the sentence because of what hits he took during his high school football career. Your thoughts on the difference in that burden in this case?
I think there's a big difference, and I think that this has a different level of significance than it would be, for example, in a civil case. Here, you have to assume that the judge and every judge in this entire country, when they are now going to face this type of an argument by a defense attorney, you have to assume that they're a parent and that they're concerned about this. So thinking back, 1993, when I was a kid, I was in junior high, right? I was one of the best football players in my city, and I loved it. I loved the accolades I'd get. And then my father wouldn't sign the permission slip to let me continue into high school. I was so upset that I left my parents' house. I slept at the local hockey arena, you know, and then it's Detroit. It got very cold. I went back to my parents' house the next day, tucked my tails between my legs, and my dad was consistent. He said, I'm not going to sign this permission slip because I feel like playing football makes you go crazy, and it does, it rewires your brain. I'm not going to do it. This is 1993, by the way, right? He's a lawyer, and he did his research, and he didn't want his son playing football. And I could see that in this father. This father is very, very, very conflicted. You could see he blames himself for it. So to answer your question, Julia, I feel like when you're a judge and you're seeing this fact pattern and you're trying to see, am I going to put this person in jail for 1 million years? You could put them up to life in prison, right? Or should I lessen it because of this? I think it's compelling because the kid tried to take his own life after this was done, and not just shoot himself in the brain. He tried to cut his own head off, right? This is different. This is a very difficult decision for this judge. I don't sympathize. I would never want to trade places with this specific judge in this case. This is going to be tough. I just asked myself, what would I do if it were me? This kid tried to cut his own head off. I saw the video of him playing against All-Americans and being thrown to the floor, his head hit multiple times. He had concussions, right? I think that this is going to be persuasive because in a civil matter, you're talking about the amount of money you're paying somebody, right? It's just a factor of money. So if we are going to pay somebody more money in a car accident because they suffered a concussion, why wouldn't we lessen their sentence in a criminal case if they had the same exact injury? I think it's compelling.
That's an interesting question.
And we have to leave it there. Thank you, Michael Jaafar, who grew up in 1993 and wanted to play football.
And we have to take his word for it that he was the best football. Dr. Rubino there talking about the difference between an adolescent brain and a fully adult brain. Let's bring in national trial attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael Jaafar, what buzzwords are you listening to? What do you think the judge is listening to from this neurologist that may sway him in terms of the sentencing?
Pretty much any damage to the brain, and obviously this neurologist is coming in with a lot of expertise, and the judge would do well to listen to him. I think the judge is coming into this with a lot of momentum because of the impassioned plea of the father and being so nice to the victims. I think the buzzwords he's looking for is, I think the judge's mind, in my opinion, would have been opened up by everything that's led up to this point, and now he's going to be a student. I hope he would just look at this and look at himself as a student and not as an expert. The expert is talking. I think the judge would be looking for buzzwords like damage to the brain, lesions to the brain. I'm already looking at these buzzwords because I'm very, very, very interested in this topic for many reasons. So I think the judge is going to be looking at anything that relates to damage to an adolescent brain.
Let's go back in and hear more from the neurologist testifying remotely. This victim impact statement coming out of order, but an important reminder of the lives that were fractured because of this. Let's bring back in national trial attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael Jaafar, your thoughts?
I think the father did it for me, Julia. I think the father was so persuasive. He did it for me, the way he talked to the victim, the way he told her how much he respected her, he loved her. She was a beautiful presence. I think the judge is going to come closer to the 18 years. It really comes down to the bias of this judge. If I was a judge on this case, I would do 18 years. Depending on his history, whether or not he's buying any of this, I think he should. I'm hoping he comes closer to the 18 years. We'll see what happens.
We will.